You're listening to the Uncanny Experts podcast, where we share lessons for growing knowledge expert businesses. The Uncanny Experts podcast is sponsored by Ethan Hathaway, the world's premier training provider to top global companies, and Virtual Tree, the unagency that helps knowledge experts, consultants, coaches, and service businesses earn more and work less. In today's episode, I'm going to answer the question of should you do LinkedIn advertising? All right, so this is a very common question I see, especially for B2B and consultants, knowledge experts, is that, well, should you invest, should you spend money on LinkedIn advertising, right? We see a lot of, so-called experts and training programs on teaching you how to use LinkedIn organically, but very few really talks about whether LinkedIn advertising. So just a few things about LinkedIn advertising. One, it's actually very expensive. Last time I had tried it, it was around $2 US per click. That is extremely expensive. Okay. So now before I delve into this, I think this is actually not a this question in itself actually can't really be answered as it is. Okay. So if you can't just ask somebody and say, should I do LinkedIn advertising? So the first thing I would do is first you'd have to understand that person's business or your business. Okay. If I know that your ideal client is found on LinkedIn, then LinkedIn is a channel that you should be considering. Now, I'm not talking about LinkedIn ads just yet. So I'm just saying that LinkedIn is a network or a medium that would be feasible because it's where your clients or your client audience is found. Now, the other question we'd have to answer now, once we know if we've established that, yeah, your client audience can be found on LinkedIn, and no, not all businesses' clients are found on LinkedIn. And to give you an example, is when I was working in Hong Kong, I found that if I was to target clients that were based in Hong Kong, LinkedIn is actually a very lousy channel to use because really the mentality with the majority of Hong Kong people is that LinkedIn is just really to find jobs. Is where recruiters find candidates for open job vacancies. Very few actually go on there to try to find business, and if there are ones that do, they do a really pretty bad job of it. Okay, so that's one reason, one example of why it's not necessarily LinkedIn is not always 100% the right answer, even if you're in B2B. It's a pretty, I think the majority of people, if you're doing B2B, then yes, there's a good chance that you would be considering LinkedIn, but it's not always the case. Okay, it's not 100%. So the other question, so once you've established that your client audience can be found on the LinkedIn social network, the other thing is having to look at your products and services. If you know your lifetime customer value and your products and services are in the pretty high, I would say 5-figure US dollars, so your product and services are priced in the 5-figure range, and you know your customer lifetime value is above, 5 figures and above US dollars, then you can consider testing out LinkedIn advertising. Okay, and the whole reason why is, like I said, LinkedIn advertising is highly expensive. You have to be selling something very high ticket, and you have to have a very high lifetime customer value in order to get a positive ROI from a paid LinkedIn advertising campaign. Okay, so I hope that helps and answers that question, if you've been wondering whether you want to be spending money on LinkedIn advertising, to be honest, you're in most cases, I actually think you're probably better off investing some time and a little bit of money in a good course or coaching in how to leverage LinkedIn as a social network without the LinkedIn advertising, really. If you know how to leverage that in a more organic way, then I think you're probably better served that way. But I mean, that's just my opinion. It doesn't, may not all apply to everybody, but I think that I would consider that before LinkedIn advertising from my experience. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please subscribe to this podcast and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any questions about your business, please feel free to leave your questions in the comments. Advertising, really. If you know how to leverage that in a more organic way, then I think you're probably better served that way. But I mean, that's just my opinion. It doesn't, may not all apply to everybody, but I think that I would consider that before LinkedIn advertising from my experience. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please subscribe to this podcast and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any questions about your business, please feel free to leave your questions in the comments. Please feel free to leave your questions in the comments.